The $800 in my hand could save my daughter's birthday. Keep the lights on. Put food on our table for a month. All I had to do was walk away. But the wallet didn't belong to just anyone, it belonged to him. The billionaire. The one testing me. And I had no idea that my next move would either destroy my life, or change it forever. Before we dive into this emotional journey, if you're enjoying these stories of unexpected love and redemption, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might just change how you see the world. Now, let's begin. The leather wallet felt like it weighed 10 pounds in Sienna Crawford's trembling hands, though she knew it couldn't be more than a few ounces. She stood in the dim stockroom of Castellano's bistro, her back pressed against shelves stacked with industrial-sized cans of tomato sauce, staring at the contents spread before her like a moral examination she hadn't studied for. $800 in crisp bills. A black American Express card that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And a driver's license bearing the face of Dominic Ashford. Yes, that Dominic Ashford, the man whose technology empire had revolutionized artificial intelligence, whose face appeared on magazine covers with headlines like the genius who changed everything, and at 38, he's worth more than some countries. Sienna's daughter Amara's voice echoed in her memory from that morning. Mama, can we get the art supplies for the school project? Everyone else has the good markers. The dim hope in her baby's eyes when Sienna had said maybe, both of them knowing it meant no. The way Amara had smiled anyway and said it was okay, that she could make do with crayons, and didn't that 8-year-old generosity just break Sienna's heart into smaller and smaller pieces? The money in her hand could buy those markers. Could pay the electricity bill that was already 2 weeks overdue. Could put actual meat on the table instead of the creative combinations of rice and beans that Sienna had learned to dress up with spices and optimism. Could maybe, just maybe, let her breathe for one damn month without the constant pressure of financial catastrophe pressing against her chest like a physical weight. But it wasn't hers. Sienna pressed her eyes shut, and suddenly she wasn't in the stockroom anymore. She was 7 years old, watching her grandmother, the woman who'd raised her after her parents' accident, carefully counting out change to return to a grocery store clerk who'd given her too much. Our integrity isn't for sale, baby girl, Grandma Lorraine had said, her dark eyes serious beneath her church hat. Not for $100. Not for $1 million. The moment you compromise it, you lose something you can never buy back. Grandma Lorraine had been gone for 3 years now, but her voice remained clearer than the present sometimes, a compass when Sienna's own sense of direction failed. With hands that shook from more than just fatigue, Sienna pulled out her phone. The screen was cracked, had been for 6 months, since the day she dropped it rushing between her 2 jobs, but it still worked. She found the business card tucked in the wallet's leather pocket, read the number twice to make sure she had it right, and dialed before she could change her mind. Ashford Industries, Executive Suite. This is Victoria speaking. The voice was smooth as silk and probably cost more per hour than Sienna made in a day. Hi, yes, Sienna cleared her throat, forcing her voice into something steadier. I'm calling from Castellano's Bistro in South Seattle. Mr. Ashford left his wallet here, and I wanted to let him know it's safe. He can collect it whenever he's able. A pause. Then, I see. May I have your name, please? Sienna Crawford. I'm a server here. One moment, Miss Crawford. The hold music was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, because of course it was. Sienna leaned against the metal shelving, feeling the cold seep through her thin uniform shirt. She'd been on her feet for 7 hours straight, and her shift didn't end for another 4. After this, she'd have barely enough time to take the bus across town to her night job cleaning offices, where she'd work until midnight scrubbing toilets for people who'd never remember her face. This is Dominic Ashford. The voice cut through her exhaustion like a blade, deeper than she'd expected, with an edge of something she couldn't quite identify. Authority, certainly. But something else. Something almost amused? Sienna straightened instinctively, though he couldn't see her. Mr. Ashford, my name is Sienna Crawford. I'm a waitress at Castellano's Bistro, and you left your wallet here during lunch service. I wanted to let you know it's secure. You can pick it up any time, or I can leave it with a manager if that's easier. You found my wallet. He said it slowly, like he was tasting the words. And you're calling to return it. Yes, sir. How much cash was inside? The question hit her like a slap. Sienna felt heat crawl up her neck, spreading across her dark brown skin in a flush she knew he couldn't see but that burned nonetheless. Excuse me. The cash, Miss Crawford. How much was in the wallet? Her jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. Of course. Of course this was where it went. Rich man loses wallet, poor black woman finds it, and the first assumption is theft. Never mind that she'd called him, that she was trying to do the right thing. The doubt was automatic, reflexive, probably unconscious on his part, but no less insulting for it. $800, she said, each word precisely enunciated. All of it's still there, Mr. Ashford. Your credit cards, too. Everything intact, if that's what you're asking. Another pause, this one stretching long enough that Sienna wondered if the call had dropped. When Ashford spoke again, something in his tone had shifted, softened maybe, or sharpened with a different kind of attention. I'll send my driver. He'll be there in 25 minutes. Please wait for him, Miss Crawford. The line went dead before she could respond. Sienna stared at her phone, fighting the urge to throw it against the wall. The audacity. The sheer nerve of that man. She'd done the right thing, the hard thing, the thing that cost her something real, and his first response was suspicion. As if poverty was a character flaw, as if the color of her skin and the worn state of her uniform automatically made her untrustworthy. She'd met his type before. Had served them countless times in her 6 years at Castellano's. Men and women who treated service workers like furniture that occasionally talked, who snapped their fingers for attention and left insultingly small tips on massive bills, who lived in a reality so divorced from hers that they might as well be different species. With more force than necessary, Sienna shoved the wallet back into her apron pocket and pushed through the stockroom door into the restaurant proper. The lunch rush had died down to a scattered handful of tables, mostly regulars who lingered over coffee and conversation. Marcus, the day cook, was singing along to old Motown in the kitchen. Her manager Tony was nowhere to be seen, probably in his office playing phone games and pretending to do paperwork. 25 minutes. She could finish her remaining tasks, collect her tips, and get this over with. But 17 minutes later, a sleek black Bentley pulled up outside the restaurant's rain-streaked windows, so jarringly out of place in this neighborhood that conversation actually stopped. Sienna watched through the glass as a man emerged from the driver's seat, not a chauffeur, but Dominic Ashford himself. He stood 6'3" in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Sienna's car, moving through the Seattle drizzle with the confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about ruining expensive clothes. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and even from a distance, she could see the sharp intelligence in his gray eyes. He walked directly to where Sienna stood frozen by the coffee station, and up close, he was even more imposing than his Forbes cover photos suggested. But it wasn't his height or his expensive cologne or even his obvious wealth that made her breath catch. It was the intensity in his gaze, like he was actually seeing her, really looking, in a way that most customers never did. "You're Sienna Crawford." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "And you're 25 minutes early, which means I'm technically still on the clock." She pulled the wallet from her apron and held it out, keeping her expression neutral despite the anger still simmering beneath her professional veneer. "Your wallet, Mr. Ashford. Everything's accounted for, if you'd like to verify." Instead of taking it immediately, he did something unexpected. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face from intimidating to something almost approachable, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I don't need to verify anything," he said quietly. "Because you already passed the test." Sienna's hand froze mid-extension. "I'm sorry, what?" "I left that wallet here deliberately, Miss Crawford. I've been conducting an experiment, testing the staff at 52 restaurants across Seattle over the past 7 months." He gestured vaguely at the restaurant around them. "You're the first person who called to return it." The words didn't make sense at first. Sienna heard them, processed them individually, but her brain refused to assemble them into coherent meaning. A test. This whole thing, her moral struggle, her choice to do the right thing despite desperate need, her pride in her own integrity, it had been engineered. Manipulated. Set up like a trap disguised as opportunity. "You've got to be kidding me," she breathed. And then louder as the full weight of it crashed over her, "You've got to be absolutely kidding me." Every head in the restaurant turned, but Sienna was far past caring about making a scene. The rage that had been quietly burning since his suspicious question on the phone now erupted into full flame, fueled by exhaustion and disappointment and the sheer insulting absurdity of what he just admitted. "You sit there in your," she gestured sharply at his suit, "your $1,000 outfit, playing games with people's integrity? Testing us like lab rats? Do you have any idea what $800 means to someone like me?" Her voice cracked, but she pushed through it. "That's my daughter's birthday next week. That's the electricity bill. That's the difference between my baby having new shoes that fit or wearing the ones that hurt her feet. That's food on the table, medicine when she's sick, the art supplies she needs for school. And you turned it into a social experiment." Dominic Ashford had the decency to look uncomfortable, his composure finally showing cracks. "Miss Crawford, I understand you're upset, but..." No, you don't understand, and that's the whole problem." Sienna shoved the wallet against his chest, forcing him to grab it or let it fall. "You can't understand. You've never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. You've never had to explain to your child why you can't afford the field trip everyone else is going on. You've never felt the weight of poverty like a physical thing, pressing down on you every single day, making every decision a calculation between bad and worse." She was breathing hard now, aware that Tony had emerged from his office, his face pale with horror at witnessing his employee verbally destroy someone who probably spent more on wine than the restaurant's monthly revenue. But Sienna couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. "You waltz into our lives with your tests and your experiments, judging us from the comfort of your ivory tower, when you have no earthly idea what it costs to be honest when you're desperate. When you have no concept of what you're actually testing. This wasn't about integrity for you, it was a game. But for me? For people like me? That choice matters. It has consequences. And you treated it like entertainment." The restaurant had gone completely silent. Even Marcus had stopped singing in the kitchen. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Sienna registered that she was probably fired, that this outburst would cost her the job she desperately needed, but the words kept pouring out like a dam had broken. You want to know about integrity, Mr. Ashford? Real integrity isn't choosing to do the right thing when it costs you nothing. It's choosing it when it costs you everything. When that $800 is the difference between keeping your lights on and sitting in the dark. When returning it means your daughter goes without again, because you're determined to teach her that honesty matters even when the world keeps showing her it doesn't. She stopped, chest heaving, tears of frustration burning behind her eyes but refusing to fall. She wouldn't give him that. Wouldn't let him see her cry. For a long moment, Dominic Ashford just stood there, wallet in hand, his gray eyes fixed on her face with an expression she couldn't read. Then slowly, deliberately, he tucked the wallet into his jacket pocket. You're absolutely right, he said quietly. Everything you just said, you're right. That was thoughtless and cruel, and you deserved far better. I apologize sincerely for treating your struggle like data in a study. Sienna blinked, thrown by the genuine contrition in his voice. But, he continued, his tone shifting into something more complex, that wasn't the only test, Miss Crawford. She frowned. What are you talking about? The real test, the one I didn't plan, the one that matters most, was what you do right now. Whether you'd swallow your justified anger to protect your job. Whether you'd smile and nod and tell me what you thought I wanted to hear, sacrificing your dignity for security. That small smile returned, different now, respect, maybe, or recognition. But you didn't. You told me exactly what you thought of me and my social experiment, consequences be damned. That's the person I've actually been looking for. Before Sienna could process that, he reached into his wallet, the very wallet she'd returned, and pulled out a business card. Not the generic corporate ones, but something else, heavy cream stock with embossed lettering. Ashford Industries is launching a new division, he said, holding out the card. Social impact initiatives, designed from the ground up by people who understand what workers actually need. Living wages, real benefits, programs that address systemic inequality instead of just throwing money at symptoms. I need someone to head it. Someone who won't be afraid to tell me when I'm being an out-of-touch billionaire. His eyes locked with hers. Someone exactly like you. Sienna stared at the card like it might turn into a snake. Director of Social Impact, Ashford Industries. Below that, a salary figure that made her stomach drop, benefits that included healthcare, retirement, education allowances. This is insane, she whispered. Probably, Ashford agreed. But I've learned that the best decisions usually feel that way at first. Think about it. Call me when you decide. He turned toward the door, then paused, looking back with something almost vulnerable in his expression. And Miss Crawford? Thank you. For being honest. Both times. I needed to hear it. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain in his Bentley, leaving Sienna standing in the middle of Castellano's bistro with a business card that might change everything, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Tony approached cautiously, his eyes wide. Sienna? What just happened? She looked down at the card, then at the restaurant around her, the scuffed linoleum, the patched vinyl booths, the life she'd been grinding through for years. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep, half disbelief, half something that might be hope. I think, she said slowly, testing the words, I just got offered a job. By yelling at a billionaire. Tony stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're joking. Sienna looked at the card again, at the embossed letters that promised something she'd stopped letting herself dream about years ago, a way out. A real chance. The possibility of giving Amara everything she deserved instead of just everything Sienna could scrape together. I really don't think I am, she said. And somewhere outside, the Seattle rain began to ease, thin streams of late afternoon sunlight breaking through the clouds like the universe itself was taking notice of something fundamental shifting in the order of things. Be brutally honest, if you found $800 and desperately needed it, would you return it? Comment yes or no below. Sienna's apartment was located in Rainier Valley, in a building that had been vintage when the word meant old and falling apart rather than fashionably retro. The heating worked sporadically, the water pressure was a prayer more than a guarantee, and her neighbors included a rotating cast of characters whose life choices occasionally required police intervention. But it was home, and after 3 years of fighting to keep it, Sienna had learned every creak in the floorboards, every trick to coax warmth from the ancient radiators. She sat at her kitchen table, a yard sale find from 5 years ago, one leg propped up with folded cardboard, and stared at Dominic Ashford's business card for the 1,000th time since arriving home 2 hours ago. The embossed letters seemed to mock her, simultaneously offering salvation and demanding she trust in something that felt too good to be real. Mama, why do you keep looking at that card? Sienna glanced up to find Amara watching her from the doorway of their shared bedroom, her daughter's natural hair pulled into 2 puffs that framed her sweet face. At 8 years old, Amara had already learned to read Sienna's moods with unsettling accuracy, to recognize when Mama was worried even when she tried to hide it. Just thinking, baby. Sienna managed a smile. Come help me with dinner? They worked together in the tiny kitchen, Amara chattering about her day at school while Sienna made spaghetti with a Jared sauce that had been on sale. Her daughter's innocence, her unguarded joy in small things, always anchored Sienna when her thoughts started spiraling. This was why she did it all, the double shifts, the exhaustion, the constant juggling. For these moments. For the chance to hear Amara laugh. But tonight, even Amara's presence couldn't quiet the war in Sienna's mind. Take the job, one voice insisted. This is the miracle you've been praying for. A chance to give Amara stability, opportunity, a future that isn't shaped by scarcity. It's too good to be true, another voice countered. Men like Dominic Ashford don't just hand out six-figure jobs to waitresses. There's something you're not seeing, some catch that will reveal itself only after you've quit everything else and burned your bridges. After dinner, after Amara was tucked in bed with a good night's story and whispered prayers, Sienna sat on their threadbare couch and pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered over the contact information for her best friend Keisha, who'd been her anchor since they'd met in community college 12 years ago, back when Sienna had still believed she'd finish her degree. The phone barely rang once before Keisha picked up. Girl, I've been waiting for you to call. Please tell me the rumor I heard about you yelling at a billionaire is not true. Sienna couldn't help but laugh, though it came out slightly hysterical. How did you even? Marcus told his cousin, who told her boyfriend, who works with my sister. The South Seattle Gossip Network is faster than the internet. Keisha's tone softened. See what happened. So Sienna told her. Everything. The wallet, the test, her explosion of rage, the impossible job offer. As she spoke, saying it all out loud, the absurdity of the situation became even more apparent. When she finished, Keisha was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay, so let me get this straight. Dominic Ashford, the Dominic Ashford, tech genius, AI revolutionary, regular fixture on lists of most powerful people under 40, he deliberately left a wallet full of money at your restaurant as some kind of integrity test. Yes. And you passed by calling to return it, even though you desperately needed that money? Yes. And then when he told you it was a test, you went completely off on him about privilege and poverty and the actual cost of integrity? Yes. And his response was to offer you a job running his new social impact division with a salary that I'm assuming is more than both of us currently make combined? Sienna closed her eyes. Yes. Another pause. Then Keisha laughed, a sound of pure disbelief. See, I don't know whether to tell you this is the best thing that's ever happened to you or the beginning of a psychological thriller. Possibly both. That's not helpful, Kuish. I know. But seriously, what are you thinking? Are you considering it? Sienna stood and moved to the window, looking out at the Seattle night. Rain had started again, pattering against the glass in a rhythm she found oddly comforting. I don't know. Part of me wants to jump at it. The money alone would change everything for me and Amara. We could move to a better neighborhood, she could go to a better school, I could actually have time with her instead of working 80-hour weeks. But it feels like a trap. Like there's something I'm not seeing. Men like Ashford don't just give away opportunities like this. And what if I take it and fail? What if I'm completely out of my depth? I'm a waitress, Kuish. I never even finished college. What do I know about running a division at a tech company? You know what actual people need, Keisha said firmly. You know what it's like to struggle, to make impossible choices, to survive in a system designed to keep you down. That's expertise, see. That's exactly what he said he needs. Or it's what he says he needs until the novelty wears off and he realizes I don't fit in his world. Keisha sighed. Look, I get it. Trust is hard, especially when you've been burned before. But answer me this, if there was no risk, if you knew for certain it would work out, would you want the job? Sienna thought about that. Imagined walking into Ashford Industries every day, using her voice and experience to actually help people like herself. Creating programs that addressed real needs instead of corporate window dressing. Making enough money that Amara never had to go without, that medical emergencies didn't become financial catastrophes, that she could think about the future without terror. Yes, she admitted quietly. If I knew it was real, I'd want it. So much. Then maybe the question isn't whether it's too good to be true. Maybe it's whether you're brave enough to find out. The next morning, Sienna called the number on the card. The same smooth voice answered. Ashford Industries, Executive Suite. This is Sienna Crawford. I'm calling to speak with Mr. Ashford about the position he offered yesterday. Of course, Miss Crawford. Mr. Ashford has been expecting your call. One moment, please. This time the hold music was jazz, Miles Davis, if Sienna wasn't mistaken. She paced her kitchen, her heart hammering. Miss Crawford. Ashford's voice carried a note of what sounded like genuine pleasure. I'm glad you called. I have questions, Sienna said, deciding directness was her best approach. A lot of them. Before I consider this seriously, I need to understand what I'm actually being offered and why you think I'm qualified. Fair enough. Would you be available to meet this afternoon? I'd prefer to discuss this in person, show you what we're building. Sienna glanced at her calendar. She wasn't due at Castellano's until the evening shift. I could meet at 2. Perfect. I'll send a car to pick you up. Where should I? No car, Sienna interrupted. Just tell me where to meet you. I'll get there myself. A pause, then a low chuckle. Of course. The Ashford Industries headquarters, 42nd floor. 2 o'clock. The building that housed Ashford Industries occupied an entire block in downtown Seattle, all steel and glass and architectural ambition. Sienna stood outside for a full minute, staring up at it, feeling monumentally out of place in her nicest dress, which, while clean and pressed, was still clearly from a discount store several years past its prime. The lobby was all marble and modern art, with a ceiling that soared 3 stories high. A receptionist with perfect makeup and a designer suit directed her to the executive elevators, which required a keycard that the woman provided with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. As the elevator climbed, Sienna watched the city fall away through the glass walls, Seattle spreading out below in a panorama of water and mountains and urban sprawl. By the time she reached the 42nd floor, her stomach was tight with nerves. The doors opened onto a space that looked more like a luxury apartment than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains beyond. The furniture was sleek and modern, the artwork probably worth more than Sienna's annual income. Dominic Ashford stood by the windows, and when he turned to face her, he was dressed more casually than before. Dark jeans, a simple button-down shirt, no tie. It made him seem more human somehow. Less intimidating. Miss Crawford. Thank you for coming. He gestured to a seating area with comfortable-looking chairs. Please sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine, Sienna said, though her throat was dry. She sat, keeping her posture straight, her hands folded in her lap. You said you wanted to show me what you're building? Ashford nodded and opened a sleek laptop on the coffee table between them, turning it so she could see the screen. Ashford Industries has been incredibly successful financially. We've revolutionized AI integration, cloud computing, data security. But recently, I've been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about how that success was built. He pulled up a series of reports, data visualizations, employee surveys. As he talked, Sienna began to see a pattern: high turnover in lower-level positions, wage disparities, complaints about work-life balance, stories of people working multiple jobs to afford living in Seattle while working for one of the most profitable companies in the city. 6 months ago, one of our janitorial staff had a heart attack in the building, Ashford continued, his voice quieter now. Jorge Martinez, father of 3. He'd been working 70-hour weeks, had a second job because our pay wasn't enough to cover his family's expenses. He survived, thankfully, but it woke me up to something I'd been willfully ignoring. He looked directly at Sienna. I've built an empire, but I've been perpetuating the same systems of inequality I thought I was above. Paying lip service to progressive values while my own employees struggled. And I realized I couldn't fix it from inside my bubble. I needed someone who understood the reality of that struggle intimately. Someone who would call me on my privilege and push back when I suggested solutions that sound good in boardrooms but don't address real problems. Sienna studied him, trying to read past the polished exterior. So you came up with the wallet test? Yes. I wanted to understand who in this city maintained integrity under pressure. Who chose honesty when dishonesty would have been easier and more profitable. He leaned back. But what I didn't anticipate was finding someone who would also have the courage to tell me I was wrong. That combination, integrity and fearlessness, that's rare. That's invaluable. Mr. Ashford. Dominic, please. Sienna hesitated, then nodded. Dominic. I'm a waitress. I have 2 years of community college, no degree, no corporate experience. You're offering me a director-level position at a major tech company. Help me understand how that makes any sense. He smiled slightly. You're thinking about it wrong. This isn't a tech position, it's a human position. The social impact division I'm creating needs someone who understands poverty not as a theoretical problem but as a lived reality. Someone who knows what actual workers need because they've been one. Someone who can design programs that work for real people, not just look good in PR releases. And you think that's me? I know it is. I've done my research, Miss Crawford. I know you've been working 2 jobs for 6 years to support yourself and your daughter. I know you dropped out of college when your grandmother got sick and needed care. I know you've been on waiting lists for better housing for 3 years, that you volunteer at your daughter's school despite working 80-hour weeks, that you've never missed a rent payment even when it meant you went without meals. Sienna felt her cheeks heat, caught between embarrassment and anger. You investigated me? I investigated all 52 people who found the wallet. You were the only one who called to return it, so yes, I dug deeper. And everything I learned convinced me you're exactly who I need. He pulled out a folder and slid it across to her. This is the formal offer. 6-figure salary, full benefits including healthcare and retirement, education allowances for you and Amara, housing assistance. Take it home, read it thoroughly, consult a lawyer if you want. I'm not asking for an answer today. Sienna opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning the documents inside. The numbers seemed surreal, like they belonged to someone else's life. There's one more thing, Dominic said. This position reports directly to me. You'll have autonomy over the programs you develop, budget authority, and a seat in leadership meetings. But it also means you'll be working closely with me, regularly. I need to know if that's something you're comfortable with, given how we met. Sienna looked up from the papers, meeting his gray eyes. There was something there she couldn't quite name, an openness, maybe, or vulnerability. Despite his wealth and power, in this moment he seemed almost uncertain, waiting for her judgment. Why does this matter so much to you? She asked. Really? You could throw money at this problem, hire consultants, fund programs. Why do you care about getting it right? Dominic was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the windows. My father built Ashford Industries from nothing. He was brilliant, driven, and utterly ruthless in pursuit of success. He created incredible technology and tremendous wealth, and he died at 53 of a stress-induced stroke, having sacrificed everything, including his relationship with his family, for the company. He looked back at her. I inherited his empire and his drive, but I don't want to inherit his blindness to the human cost. I want to build something different. Something better. But I can't do it alone, and I can't do it from inside my privilege bubble. The honesty in his voice struck something in Sienna, a recognition of shared humanity beneath the vast differences in their circumstances. I need to think about this, she said finally. It's a lot to process. Of course. Take all the time you need. He stood, and Sienna did the same. But Miss Crawford, Sienna, I hope you'll seriously consider it. I think we could do something meaningful together. Something that actually changes lives instead of just changing optics. As Sienna rode the elevator back down, folder clutched to her chest, she felt the weight of possibility pressing down on her like a physical force. This could change everything. Or it could destroy the fragile stability she'd fought so hard to build. When she stepped out into the Seattle afternoon, the sun had broken through the clouds, and for just a moment, she let herself imagine saying yes. Would you have kept your cool if someone accused you of stealing after doing the right thing? Comment your reaction. Sienna spent the next 3 days in a fog of possibility and terror. She brought the offer letter to legal aid, where a sympathetic lawyer reviewed it and confirmed it was legitimate. No hidden clauses, no tricks, just an absurdly generous employment contract that seemed designed to actually support rather than exploit. She talked to Keisha for hours, dissecting every angle, every risk, every potential outcome. She made lists of pros and cons that inevitably skewed heavily toward pros, which somehow made her more suspicious rather than less. She didn't tell Amara yet. Couldn't bear to raise her daughter's hopes if this all fell apart. On the third night, lying awake at 2 a.m. while rain drummed against the windows, Sienna found herself thinking about her grandmother again. Grandma Lorraine, who'd worked as a nurse for 40 years, who'd raised Sienna on a modest pension after the accident that took her parents, who'd always pushed her to dream bigger than their circumstances suggested was reasonable. Don't let fear make your decisions, baby girl, Grandma Lorraine had said during one of their last conversations, when the cancer had already started stealing her strength but not her spirit. Fear will keep you safe, but it'll also keep you small. Sometimes you got to be brave enough to reach for more. Sienna stared at the ceiling, listening to Amara's soft breathing from the other side of their bedroom, and made her decision. The next morning, she called Dominic Ashford's direct line. Sienna, he answered, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Have you made a decision? I have questions first. Conditions, really. I'm listening. I need a trial period. 3 months where either of us can walk away if it's not working, no penalties, no burned bridges. I can't quit both my jobs and then have this fall apart. Done. What else? I need mentorship. Someone in your company who can help me navigate corporate culture, teach me what I don't know. I won't pretend to have expertise I don't have, but I also won't set myself up to fail from ignorance. I can assign you an executive coach and pair you with one of our senior directors. Anything else? Sienna took a breath. I need to know that my voice actually matters. That when I tell you something isn't working, when I push back on ideas that sound good but won't help real people, you'll listen. I don't want to be a token, Dominic. I don't want to be the diversity hire who gets paraded around and then ignored when it's inconvenient. A pause. Then quietly, that's what I'm most afraid of too, actually. That I'll revert to type, fall back into patterns I'm trying to break. Which is why I'm asking you to hold me accountable. To call me out when I slip. That's not just part of the job, Sienna. It's essential to the job. Something in his voice, the genuine vulnerability there, made her relax slightly. Okay, she said. Okay, I'll do it. When do you want me to start? How about 2 weeks? Give you time to give proper notice to your current employers, get Amara settled with the transition. 2 weeks, Sienna echoed, and suddenly it was real. Terrifyingly, impossibly real. Telling Tony at Castellano's that she was leaving was harder than expected. He'd been a decent boss, if unimaginative, and he'd worked with her schedule when Amara was sick, which counted for something. You're really leaving us for Ashford Industries? He asked, shaking his head in disbelief. Sienna, that's incredible. I mean, we'll miss you, but that's a hell of an opportunity. I'll give you 2 weeks to find and train my replacement, Sienna assured him. I won't leave you in the lurch. Her night job at the cleaning company was less sentimental. Her supervisor barely looked up from his clipboard when she gave notice, just grunted and made a note. Sienna walked out of that building for the last time feeling lighter than air, like she was shedding a weight she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Telling Amara was the best part. She waited until after dinner, until they were snuggled together on the couch reading before bedtime. Then Sienna set down the book and took her daughter's small hands in hers. Baby, I need to tell you about something that's going to change for us. Amara's eyes went wide with worry. Did something bad happen? No, sweetheart. Something good. Really good. Sienna smiled, feeling tears prickle at the corners of her eyes. Mama got a new job. A really important job at a big company, and it's going to mean some big changes for us. What kind of changes? Well, I won't have to work 2 jobs anymore. I'll have more time to spend with you. And we'll be able to afford a nicer place to live, maybe one where you can have your own bedroom. And we can get you those art supplies you wanted, and sign you up for activities, and… Sienna's voice broke slightly. And you won't have to worry about whether we can afford things anymore. Amara was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, does this mean you won't be tired all the time? The question hit Sienna right in the heart. She pulled her daughter close, burying her face in those soft curls. Yeah, baby. It means I won't be so tired. I'll be able to be a better mama to you. You're already the best mama, Amara said fiercely. But I like that you won't be tired. Sienna's first day at Ashford Industries was a blur of orientation sessions, paperwork, and introductions. Dominic had assigned her a corner office on the 42nd floor with those same stunning views, which felt absurd for someone who'd been serving pasta marinara 2 weeks ago. Her executive coach turned out to be a sharp woman named Patricia Chun, who'd been with the company for 15 years and seemed genuinely excited about the social impact initiative. I've been pushing for something like this for years, Patricia said during their first meeting. We have all this wealth, all this power, and we've been doing the bare minimum for our workers. It's about time someone shook things up. The senior director Dominic paired her with was Marcus Hamilton, no relation to the cook from Castellanos, though Sienna found the name coincidence amusing. Marcus was a black man in his 50s who'd climbed from entry-level programming to senior leadership over 25 years, and he had insights into navigating corporate culture that Sienna absorbed like a sponge. You're going to feel like an imposter, Marcus told her over coffee in the company cafe. Everyone does, especially those of us who didn't come up through traditional channels. But here's the secret, half the people here are winging it too. They just hide it better. Your advantage is that you know what you don't know, and you're willing to learn. That puts you ahead of the MBAs who think their degree makes them experts. Sienna spent her first 2 weeks in listening mode, attending meetings, reviewing existing employee programs, conducting interviews with workers at every level of the company. She quickly discovered that the problems Dominic had described were just the tip of the iceberg. The janitorial staff were contracted through an outside agency that paid minimum wage with no benefits. The cafeteria workers had similar issues. Even among the tech workers, there were stark disparities. The engineers and developers were well compensated, but administrative staff, customer service reps, and lower-level IT support struggled with Seattle's high cost of living. Sienna compiled her findings into a presentation, working late into the night refining her recommendations, second-guessing every word. When the day came to present to the leadership team, she felt sick with nerves. The conference room was intimidating, a long glass table surrounded by executives whose combined net worth probably exceeded some small nation's GDP. Dominic sat at the head, his expression neutral and professional, giving nothing away. Sienna stood at the front with her slides, acutely aware of how different she was from everyone else in the room. The only woman. One of only 3 black people. The only one without an advanced degree or decades of corporate experience. But then she thought about Jorge Martinez, the janitor who'd had a heart attack. About the cafeteria worker she'd interviewed who lived in her car because she couldn't afford rent. About Amara, and all the children of workers whose parents' struggles shaped their entire childhood. She cleared her throat and began. I've spent the past 2 weeks talking to people across this company, from entry-level contract workers to senior engineers. What I found was a system that's fundamentally broken, not because of malice but because of blind spots. We've created a culture that rewards technical brilliance and executive leadership while treating the people who keep this building running every day as expendable. She pulled up her first slide, data on employee turnover, wage disparities, benefit gaps. Our contract workers have a turnover rate of 85% annually. Not because they're bad workers, but because we don't pay them enough to live. They're subsidizing our company's profit margin with their poverty. One of the executives, a silver-haired man whose title Sienna couldn't remember, shifted uncomfortably. Those positions are meant to be entry-level, temporary. Why? Sienna interrupted, surprising herself with her own boldness. Why do we assume that cleaning our offices or serving our food should be temporary positions that don't deserve living wages? These are essential functions that we rely on every single day. The people doing them deserve to be able to afford housing, healthcare, and basic dignity. She saw Dominic's slight smile, though he remained silent. Sienna continued through her presentation, outlining specific recommendations: bring contract workers in-house with full benefits, implement a living wage floor across all positions, create pathways for advancement, establish childcare support, provide emergency financial assistance funds, develop real diversity and inclusion initiatives beyond lip service. This will cost money, she acknowledged. Significant money in the short term. But the long-term benefits, reduced turnover, increased productivity, better company reputation, actual positive social impact, they far outweigh the costs. And frankly, we can afford it. Ashford Industries made $4.2 billion in profit last year. We can afford to treat our workers like humans. The room was silent when she finished. Sienna stood there, pulse racing, wondering if she'd just torpedoed her career before it really began. Then Dominic spoke. Questions for Sienna? They came rapid fire: financial concerns, implementation logistics, timeline questions. Sienna answered what she could, admitted when she didn't know, promised to research and follow up. The silver-haired executive who challenged her earlier surprised her by nodding thoughtfully and asking about pilot programs. When the meeting finally ended, Sienna felt like she'd run a marathon. She gathered her materials with shaking hands, expecting Dominic to ask her to stay behind and receive the bad news privately. Instead, he just said, "Good work, Sienna. We'll convene a working group to start implementing your recommendations. I want a detailed plan within a month." As she walked back to her office, Patricia caught up with her in the hallway. That was incredible. I've never seen anyone challenge the leadership team like that, especially not in their first month. Did I overstep? Sienna asked anxiously. Patricia laughed. Are you kidding? You did exactly what you were hired to do. Some of those executives needed to hear hard truths, and you delivered them with data and compassion. Dominic looked like a proud parent watching his kid ace a test. Back in her office, Sienna sank into her chair and let out a long breath. Through the windows, Seattle sprawled in afternoon light, and for the first time since accepting this position, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she actually belonged here. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. That was brave. Also correct. Thank you for not pulling punches. Duh. Sienna smiled and typed back, "You hired me to tell you the truth. That's what I'm going to do." The response came almost immediately, "I'm counting on it." She could have been fired for this outburst. Was it worth it? Comment yes or no and explain why. 3 months into her new role, Sienna stood in her apartment, no, her former apartment, watching movers load the last of her belongings into their truck. Tomorrow, she and Amara would wake up in a 2-bedroom unit in Capitol Hill, with working heating, reliable water pressure, and windows that didn't rattle in the wind. Amara had her own room for the first time in her life, painted the purple she'd shyly requested when Sienna had asked what color she wanted. The transformation of their circumstances still felt surreal, like a dream Sienna might wake from at any moment. But it was real. The job was real. The paycheck that had hit her account this morning, more than she used to make in 3 months, was devastatingly beautifully real. Keisha appeared in the doorway carrying a box labeled, "Kitchen Fragile." "That's the last one. Girl, I still can't believe you're moving to Capitol Hill. That's like, actual Seattle. Not hoping to survive Seattle." Sienna laughed, though tears pricked her eyes. "I know. I keep waiting for someone to tell me it's a mistake, that they meant to hire someone else." "Stop that." Keisha set down the box and pulled Sienna into a fierce hug. "You earned this. You're killing it at that job, and everyone knows it. Besides, Dominic Ashford isn't stupid enough to let you go now that you've reorganized half his company." It was true that things had been moving fast. The working group Dominic had assembled to implement Sienna's recommendations had turned into a full-scale restructuring initiative. Contract workers were being brought in-house. The wage floor had been established. A child care partnership was in development. It wasn't perfect yet, corporate change moved glacially, but it was happening. And Sienna was at the center of it all, learning on the fly, making mistakes and recovering from them, slowly finding her footing in a world she'd never imagined inhabiting. The Capitol Hill apartment felt like a palace compared to their old place. Amara ran through the rooms, marveling at the space, the light, the fact that she had her own closet. Sienna stood in the kitchen, a real kitchen with a dishwasher and countertop space, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude so intense it was almost painful. That evening, after Amara was asleep in her new purple bedroom, Sienna sat on her new couch, actual furniture, not curbside finds, and video called Keisha. "So how does it feel?" Keisha asked. "Being officially moved into your new life?" "Terrifying," Sienna admitted. "I keep thinking about the woman I was 6 months ago, wondering what she'd think of all this." "She'd think you're a badass who deserves every bit of it." "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm playing dress-up. Like I'm wearing someone else's life." Sienna pulled a throw blanket around herself. "There was this leadership retreat last week. 2 days at this resort in the San Juans, and I'm sitting there with executives talking about quarterly projections and strategic pivots, and all I can think is I used to clean offices like this. I used to empty their trash cans. And now you're changing their company culture from the inside," Keisha pointed out. "That's not dress-up, see. That's evolution." Sienna smiled despite her insecurities. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You're just finally in a position to appreciate it." The first real conflict came in month 4, during a budget meeting that Sienna had been dreading for weeks. The financial team had raised concerns about the cost of her initiatives, particularly the proposal to convert contract workers to full employees. The numbers were substantial, an additional $12 million annually in wages and benefits. We're not saying the goals aren't admirable, the CFO, a severe woman named Janet Reynolds, said, her tone suggesting she thought exactly that. But we need to be realistic about what's financially sustainable. Sienna had prepared for this, had her data ready. The current turnover rate among contract workers is 85%. The cost of constant rehiring and retraining is approximately $8 million annually. Retention alone will offset a significant portion of the new expense. Additionally, employee satisfaction scores have increased by 22% since we announced these changes, which correlates with increased productivity. Correlation isn't causation, Janet interrupted. And soft metrics like satisfaction don't necessarily translate to bottom-line impact. With respect, Sienna said, keeping her voice level despite her rising frustration, treating humans decently shouldn't require bottom-line justification. But if you need hard numbers, I have them. She pulled up a slide showing projected savings from reduced turnover, increased productivity, improved company reputation leading to better talent acquisition, and reduced legal risk from labor violations. The numbers were solid, backed by studies from similar initiatives at other companies. But Janet wasn't convinced, and neither were several other members of the finance team. The meeting devolved into an increasingly tense back and forth about priorities and fiscal responsibility. Finally, Dominic spoke from his position at the table's head. We're implementing Sienna's recommendations. All of them. Find the budget. Janet's jaw tightened. Dominic, I need to advise against. Your advice is noted. But this isn't up for debate. His tone was pleasant but absolute. We made a commitment to change how this company operates. That means actually changing, not just talking about it when it's convenient. The meeting ended shortly after, and Sienna gathered her materials with shaking hands, acutely aware of the hostile glances from the finance team. She'd made enemies today, powerful ones. Outside the conference room, Dominic caught up with her. Walk with me. They moved to a quiet corner of the floor, away from curious ears. Dominic's expression was serious. I need you to understand something. What you're doing here, it threatens people who are invested in the status quo. You're going to face pushback, sometimes aggressive pushback. It's going to get harder before it gets easier. I know, Sienna said. But I can handle it. I believe you can. But I also need to make sure you have support. Janet's not going to make this easy, and she has allies on the board. He paused. Which is why I want you at the next board meeting. Present your full vision directly to them, make your case without middle management filters. Sienna felt her stomach drop. The board of directors? Dominic, I'm not ready for. Yes, you are. You were ready the day you yelled at me in that restaurant. He smiled slightly. Besides, they need to hear this from you, not from me translating it through corporate speak. Your voice, your perspective, that's what makes this real. Preparing for the board presentation consumed the next 2 weeks. Sienna worked with Patricia and Marcus, refining her message, anticipating objections, gathering case studies from other companies that had implemented similar programs. Amara noticed her mother's stress. Mama, you're working late again. I know, baby. I'm sorry. It's just this one important meeting, and then things will calm down. Is it because you're trying to help people like us? Sienna paused in reviewing her notes, surprised. What do you mean? Amara shrugged, wise beyond her 8 years. I heard you talking to Auntie Keisha. About making things better for workers who don't have enough money. That's what you used to be, right? Before the new job. Yeah, sweetheart. That's what I used to be. Then you should do a really good job at the meeting, Amara said seriously. Because those people need someone to help them, like how you needed help before. Sienna pulled her daughter into a hug, blinking back tears. You're absolutely right. I'll do my best, I promise. The board meeting was even more intimidating than Sienna had imagined. The room was all dark wood and leather, portraits of past company leaders lining the walls like judgment. The board members, 11 powerful individuals whose collective wealth and influence shaped industries, sat around a massive table watching her with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. Dominic introduced her briefly, then stepped back, giving her the floor. Sienna took a breath and began. 6 months ago, I was working 2 jobs to support my daughter and myself, struggling to afford basic necessities despite working 80-hour weeks. I was one unexpected expense away from homelessness, one medical emergency from financial catastrophe. And I was angry at a system that demanded so much of me while giving so little back, angry at companies that made billions while their workers qualified for food stamps. She had their attention now, every eye on her. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because my experience isn't unique. Right. Now in this building, we employ hundreds of people facing the same struggles I faced. They clean our offices, serve our food, maintain our systems, and we pay them wages that guarantee poverty. Not because we can't afford better, but because we've accepted a narrative that says their work is worth less. That they're worth less. Sienna pulled up her first slide. I'm here to challenge that narrative and show you why changing it isn't just morally right, it's strategically smart. She walked them through everything: the data on turnover costs, the productivity impacts of employee satisfaction, the competitive advantages of being known as an employer that actually cares about its workers. She showed them examples from companies like Costco and Gravity Payments that had invested in their employees and seen remarkable returns. But she also didn't shy away from the moral argument. We have a choice here. We can continue operating like every other tech company, maximizing profit while minimizing human value. Or we can be different. We can prove that you don't have to choose between profitability and humanity, that treating people with dignity isn't a loss on the balance sheet but an investment in something bigger than quarterly earnings. One of the board members, an older man with silver hair and sharp eyes, raised his hand. Miss Crawford, I appreciate your passion, but passion doesn't pay dividends. How do you respond to concerns that these initiatives will make us less competitive, that we'll be handicapping ourselves while our rivals operate more efficiently? Sienna met his gaze steadily. I'd ask you to define efficiency. If efficiency means burning through workers and externalizing the human cost onto society, then yes, we'll be less efficient. But if efficiency means building a stable, loyal, productive workforce that stays with us and performs at their best, then we'll be more efficient than competitors still stuck in the exploitation model. Another board member jumped in. And if the market punishes us for this? If shareholders revolt because we're spending money on social programs instead of maximizing returns? Then we make the case that long-term sustainability requires social sustainability, Sienna responded. We're not talking about charity, we're talking about running a company that can thrive for decades, not just quarters. The companies that will survive the next wave of social change are the ones getting ahead of it now, not the ones being dragged into compliance kicking and screaming. The questions continued, some hostile, some genuinely curious. Sienna answered each one, drawing on her research, her lived experience, and an internal conviction that surprised her with its strength. When it was finally over, she had no idea if she'd convinced anyone. The board members thanked her politely, their faces unreadable, and she left the room feeling drained and uncertain. Dominic found her in her office an hour later. The board approved your proposal. Full implementation, with budget increases. Sienna looked up sharply. What? You convinced them. Or rather, you convinced enough of them that the holdouts didn't want to be on the wrong side of history. He smiled. Congratulations, Director Crawford. You just transformed how this company operates. The magnitude of it hit Sienna all at once, the responsibility, the opportunity, the trust that had been placed in her. She felt tears threatening and blinked them back fiercely. Hey, Dominic said gently. It's okay to be emotional. This is a big deal. Sienna struggled for words. I keep thinking about all the people this will help. People like I used to be, who just needed a chance, who just needed someone to see their worth. And now I get to be the person who helps create that chance. You already are, Dominic said. And you're just getting started. Would you trust this job offer or think it's too good to be true? Comment trust or suspicious. 8 months into her tenure at Ashford Industries, Sienna stood in the community center in Rainier Valley, her old neighborhood, watching workers file in for the company's first regional town hall. These weren't the executives or engineers who filled the headquarters. These were the custodial staff, the cafeteria workers, the maintenance crews, the people whose labor kept the company running but who'd never been invited to have a voice in how it operated. Until now. Sienna had fought for these town halls, insisting that real employee engagement meant actually engaging with all employees, not just the ones who worked in tech. Dominic had supported her immediately, but implementation had been a logistical challenge. Coordinating schedules, finding accessible venues, providing translation services for non-English speakers, arranging childcare so parents could attend. But they'd done it. And now nearly 200 workers sat in folding chairs, looking skeptical and uncertain, like they weren't quite sure why they were here or if this was some elaborate setup. Sienna took the microphone, her heart pounding but her voice steady. Thank you all for coming. I know many of you gave up precious free time to be here, and I don't take that lightly. My name is Sienna Crawford, and I'm the Director of Social Impact at Ashford Industries. But before that, I was a lot like many of you. She saw some interest spark in the crowd. I worked 2 jobs for years, waitress during the day, cleaning offices at night. I struggled to pay bills, to afford healthcare, to give my daughter the basics she needed. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to do essential work that nobody acknowledges or values. So when I got this job, I made a commitment. I would use whatever power I had to make things better for people like us. Sienna outlined the changes that had been implemented: wage increases, benefits expansion, childcare support, emergency assistance funds, pathways for advancement. But more importantly, she asked questions and listened. A woman in her 50s raised her hand. This all sounds good, but how do we know it's real? How do we know you won't change your mind when it becomes expensive or inconvenient? That's a fair question, Sienna acknowledged. Trust has to be earned, especially when companies have broken it repeatedly. All I can offer is transparency and accountability. We're implementing independent audits of our programs, creating employee advisory councils with real decision-making power, and I'm committing to hold these town halls quarterly so you can tell me directly when we're failing. A younger man spoke up. What if we have concerns or complaints? Who do we tell without risking our jobs? We're establishing multiple reporting channels, anonymous hotlines, direct email to my office, in-person office hours. And we're implementing protection policies for anyone who raises concerns in good faith. Retaliation will have consequences at the highest levels. The questions kept coming, some skeptical, some hopeful, all legitimate. Sienna answered what she could, admitted when she didn't know, promised to follow up on specific issues. By the end of the 2-hour session, the atmosphere had shifted from distrust to cautious optimism. As people filed out, several workers approached Sienna personally, sharing their stories, thanking her for listening. A custodian named Maria gripped her hand tightly and said, "You give me hope. For the first time in 15 years working here, I feel like someone sees me." Sienna had to excuse herself after that, finding a quiet corner where she could cry without anyone seeing. That night, Sienna and Amara sat in their living room, the lights of Seattle twinkling through the windows. Amara was working on homework, real homework, from the much better school she now attended, while Sienna reviewed feedback forms from the town hall. "Mama, can I ask you something?" Amara looked up from her math worksheet. "Of course, baby. Are you happy? With your new job and everything?" Sienna set aside her laptop and pulled Amara close. "I am. It's hard sometimes, and stressful, but yes, I'm happy. More than that, I feel like I'm doing something that matters." "Why do you ask?" "Because you smile more now. And you're not tired all the time. And..." Amara hesitated. "And I think Grandma Lorraine would be proud of you." Sienna's breath caught. They didn't talk about Grandma Lorraine often, it still hurt too much sometimes. "What makes you say that?" "Because you're helping people. Like she did when she was a nurse. You're making things better." Sienna hugged her daughter tightly, overwhelmed by love and grief and hope all tangled together. "I think you're right. I think she would be proud." The 1-year mark of Sienna's employment came with a surprise. Dominic asked her to co-present with him at a major tech industry conference about Ashford Industries' transformation. "Absolutely not," Sienna said immediately. "I'm not comfortable with public speaking on that scale." "You spoke to our board of directors. You run town halls with hundreds of employees. That's different. That's our people, our company. This is industry leaders, press, people who will judge and criticize. People who need to hear what we've done," Dominic interrupted gently. "Sienna, we've proven that a tech company can prioritize people and still be profitable. We've reduced turnover by 60%, increased productivity by 32%, and improved our public reputation significantly. Other companies need to know this is possible, and they need to hear it from you, not just from me." Sienna wanted to refuse. But she thought about all the workers at other companies who were still struggling, still being exploited, still hoping for someone to fight for them. "Fine," she said. "But I'm writing my own remarks." The conference took place at a convention center in San Francisco, filled with thousands of tech industry professionals. Sienna stood backstage, her palms sweating, while Dominic reviewed his notes beside her with infuriating calm. "You're going to be great," he said, noticing her anxiety. "Easy for you to say. You're used to this. And you're used to things much harder than this." He turned to face her fully. "Sienna, you survived poverty while raising a child alone. You worked yourself to exhaustion and still maintained your integrity. You walked into a corporate world designed to exclude you and transformed it from the inside. A 20-minute presentation is nothing compared to what you've already done." His confidence in her helped, a little. When their time came, they walked on stage together to polite applause. Dominic spoke first, outlining the business case for their social impact initiatives with charts and data. Then it was Sienna's turn. She stepped to the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces, mostly white, mostly male, mostly wealthy. For a moment, her nerve wavered. Then she thought about Maria, the custodian who felt seen for the first time in 15 years. About Jorge Martinez, who'd survived his heart attack and now had proper health care and reasonable hours. About Amara, who could dream bigger because her mother had been given a chance to do the same. "My name is Sienna Crawford," she began, "and a year ago, I was a waitress earning minimum wage, working 80-hour weeks, and struggling to survive. Today, I'm the Director of Social Impact at Ashford Industries. I'm here to tell you about the journey between those two realities, and why it matters for your companies too." She told them everything: the wallet test, her anger at Dominic's privilege, the uncomfortable conversations about inequality, the resistance she'd faced, the victories they'd won. She didn't sanitize it or make it comfortable. She challenged them to examine their own company's practices, to question the systems they'd taken for granted. "The question isn't whether you can afford to treat your workers with dignity," she concluded. "It's whether you can afford not to. Because the world is changing. Workers are organizing, consumers are paying attention, and the companies that adapt now will thrive while the ones clinging to exploitation models will be left behind. You have a choice. Make the right one." The applause when she finished was substantial, and during the Q&A session that followed, the questions came rapid fire. Some were skeptical, Some were genuinely curious, but all of them engaged with the substance of what she'd said. Afterward, as they left the stage, Dominic put a hand on her shoulder. "You were phenomenal. Truly." Sienna felt the adrenaline starting to fade, leaving her shaky but exhilarated. "I can't believe I just did that." "I can. I've always known you could." The impact of the conference presentation rippled out in unexpected ways. Sienna started receiving invitations to speak at other events, to consult with companies wanting to implement similar programs, to join boards and advisory committees. It was overwhelming and flattering and terrifying all at once. But what mattered most to her were the smaller victories that didn't make headlines. The single mother who got promoted from cafeteria worker to administrative assistant through the new Advancement Pathway program, the custodian who could finally afford his diabetes medication thanks to the improved healthcare, the family who moved into better housing with help from a company's assistance fund. These were the stories Sienna collected and held close, reminders of why the work mattered. One afternoon, she was reviewing program metrics when her assistant buzzed. "Ms. Crawford, there's someone here to see you. A Mr. Jorge Martinez." Sienna stood immediately. "Send him in, please." Jorge Martinez entered her office looking healthier than the photos she'd seen from before his heart attack. He was a compact man in his late 40s with kind eyes and work-worn hands. "Mr. Martinez, please sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be good, thank you." He sat, looking around the office with obvious discomfort at its luxury. "I'm sorry to come unannounced, Ms. Crawford, but I wanted to thank you personally." "Thank me? Mr. Martinez, I should be thanking you. You're the reason this initiative exists. Your heart attack woke Mr. Ashford up to what was happening." Jorge shook his head. "But you're the one who did something about it. Because of the changes you made, I work one job now instead of two. I have real health care. I can spend time with my kids, go to their soccer games, help with homework. You gave me my life back." Sienna felt tears threatening. "I'm just glad you're doing better. Better than better. And I'm not the only one. Everyone's talking about what you've done, how you fought for us." Jorge leaned forward, his expression intense. "We know you're one of us, Ms. Crawford. We know you understand because you lived it. That means everything." After Jorge left, Sienna stood at her office windows, looking out at Seattle. Somewhere down there was Castellano's Bistro, where this had all started with a forgotten wallet and an impossible choice. Somewhere down there were people still struggling like she had, still hoping for a chance. She pulled out her phone and texted Dominic, "We should expand the program. Other cities, other industries. If we can do it here, we can help others do it everywhere." His response came quickly, "I was hoping you'd say that. Let's talk tomorrow about scaling up. You've proven the model works. Now let's change the world." Sienna smiled, remembering the woman she'd been a year ago, exhausted, struggling, angry at a system that seemed designed to keep her down. That woman had made a choice to be honest when dishonesty would have been easier. Had stood up for her integrity when it cost her everything. And that choice had led her here, to a place where she could help others make the same journey. Where she could prove that one person's courage could ripple out into systemic change. Her phone rang, Amara's school. "Ms. Crawford, Amara asked me to call. She wanted you to know she got an A on her science project and can't wait to tell you about it when you get home." "Thank you," Sienna said, her smile widening. "Please tell her I'm so proud of her, and we'll celebrate tonight." As she hung up, Sienna caught her reflection in the window glass. A successful professional in a corner office with a view, yes, but more importantly, a mother who could finally give her daughter the childhood she deserved. A woman who'd taken a test she didn't know she was taking and passed with flying colors, not by keeping the money but by keeping her integrity. The wallet Dominic Ashford had left behind had been a test, yes. But the real test had been everything that came after, whether Sienna would have the courage to step into an impossible opportunity, to challenge systems of power, to use her voice even when it made people uncomfortable. She'd passed that test too. And she was just getting started. Outside, the Seattle sky was clearing after an afternoon rain, and somewhere in the city below, another person was facing an impossible choice, struggling to do the right thing when the wrong thing was so much easier. Sienna made a mental note to expand their emergency assistance fund, to create more pathways for people like that. Because she remembered what it felt like to stand at that crossroads, and she was determined that no one else would have to stand there alone. The city lights began to twinkle as evening approached, each one representing a life, a story, a struggle. And Sienna Crawford, former waitress, current director of social impact, stood at her window and promised them all that she would keep fighting, keep pushing, keep making the hard choices that created real change. Because that's what integrity looked like when it came with power, not just doing the right thing yourself, but making it easier for others to do the right thing too. And that was worth more than any wallet full of cash could ever be. This story proves that integrity pays. If this inspired you, hit that like button, subscribe for more true stories, and drop a like in the comments if you believe good things happen to good people.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.